Welcome to today's webinar, Breaking Through Breakeven, Achieving Revenue Growth and Better Patient Outcomes with ECMO. This is Ashley Myers, HFMA's Client Services Specialist, and I will be moderating today's session. Now it is my pleasure to welcome today's speakers, Matthew Herwig, Dr. Eric Testow, and Dr. Steve Zanders. And with that, Matthew, I'll turn this presentation over to you.
Ashley, thank you so very much. I greatly appreciate it. And on behalf of Specialty Care, we are delighted to be speaking with you all today. What I'd first like to do is take a brief moment and make some quick introductions to our audience. First, what I'd like to do is introduce Specialty Care for those who may not be familiar with who we are as an organization. Specialty Care is the industry leader in perfusion, ECMO, and intraoperative neuromonitoring. We provide staff and resources to over 1,100 hospitals across the country and health systems. We support 1 in 7 open heart cases or surgeries performed in the country every single day, and we support 1 in 4 ECMO programs across the entire United States. So on behalf of Specialty Care, we thank you and we're pleased to be speaking with you today. Now, introducing our guest, I will start. I'm going to be acting as your quote-unquote moderator and participating in the presentation. My name is Matthew Herwig, and I am the Vice President of Sales here at Specialty Care, representing our cardiac care business unit. And I've been with Specialty Care a little bit less than 10 years, and I've been in healthcare my entire career. So it is wonderful, again, to be speaking with you. And now, more importantly, on to our wonderful guests that are joining us today. I'd like to introduce not only a wonderful friend, but an outstanding physician to introduce himself, and that is Dr. Steve Zanders. Steve, if you'd like to introduce yourself, please.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Steve Zanders. I currently am the Medical Director for Neurocritical Care and the Associate Director for Critical Care for the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center with the what we call our central campuses located near the capital of Pennsylvania and Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
Dr. Zanders, thank you so much. It's great to be having you here at this presentation today. I'd also like to introduce a wonderful friend as well as a tremendous colleague that I have the opportunity to work very closely with, and that is Dr. Eric Testow. And Eric, I'd like for you to introduce yourself, please.
Absolutely. Thank you, Matt. Again, Eric Testow, our Vice President of Data Science and Research here at Specialty Care. I've been with the company, like Matt, just about 10 years, really focusing on a lot of uses for our clinical data, doing peer-reviewed research with that, and also helping our customers to kind of optimize their practice and look at quality indicators and things of that sort. So thank you.
Wonderful. All right. So what we would like to do first is start the webinar with a question. No better way to start a webinar than with a question. So the first question is, have you considered an ECMO program as a revenue generator at your hospital? So pick the answer that comes first to the top of your mind. So answer number 1, I like revenue. But what is ECMO? Answer number 2, yes, and we have a current ECMO program. Answer number 3, yes, we are evaluating the opportunity, but do have some questions. And finally, answer number 4, no, we have not considered an ECMO program. So we have about a minute for you to thoughtfully think through these answers and pick the one that you would like to. And I have been instructed by Ashley that I have to talk for this minute while you're choosing your answers. So the faster you choose, the better. So there we go. Let's take a look at these answers. I like revenue, but what is ECMO? Okay. All right, wonderful. Those are great. Those are great. So I will close and we will proceed forward. So what we want to first do is set a baseline from an educational perspective on 2 things. First, what is ECMO, for those who may not be familiar with it? And the second is, what is an ECMO specialist? for the purposes of today's discussion. So for those who are not familiar with ECMO, ECMO is extracorporeal membrane oxygenation, and it is a life-saving medical technology providing temporary support for the heart and or the lungs when they're compromised. They are not functioning properly. What the machine does, along with the ECMO specialist, of course, who's responsible for that machine, it adds oxygen and it removes carbon dioxide directly from the blood, very similar if the organ was functioning properly. It keeps a person alive during surgery or other medical procedures, and it provides temporary support when the heart and or the lungs are just not functioning properly. They just need a rest for a period of time. And of course, it gives clinicians and physicians the opportunity to think about treatments for that particular patient and or a potential transplant that the patient may need. So one thing that you may be familiar with, for those who are not, ECMO became a key treatment for critically ill patients during the COVID pandemic. That said, surprisingly, there's still some hospitals that have not adopted ECMO yet at their hospital, and that's what we're here to talk about today. What is an ECMO specialist? For the purposes of today's discussion, we define an ECMO specialist as either an ICU nurse and or a respiratory therapist who can sit bedside and take care of that particular patient. What I find, covering the entire United States and supporting all of the ECMO programs that we do, that model is the most efficient model, effective model, and it's also fiscally responsible for the hospital. So I wanted to make sure that we're level setting on what ECMO is and what an ECMO specialist is. Now, what I find and what we find when we discuss with clients about starting up or considering starting up an ECMO program, these are some of the top objections that come to mind. There's others, of course, but these are the ones that always seem to kind of rise to the top. Objection one might be, well, we do ECMO, Matt. We put a patient on ECMO, but we don't keep the patient at our hospital. We ship that patient to another hospital. More than likely, it's a competitive hospital that's down the street or in the vicinity of the area. I'm concerned about high financial startup cost. Yes, there is an investment. You have to pay it forward to start an ECMO program. And we're going to talk more about that. But the return on the investment on the back end can be quite significant. We're going to have specialized staff requirements. That is true. It does require a unique skill set to take care of an ECMO patient. That's certainly where specialty care supports, programs across the entire United States. What about potential low volume? What if we don't have ECMO? We don't have ECMO patients. If we put this money up front to start this program, Dr. Zanders is going to spend some thoughtful time talking about all of the different applications where ECMO is very important and vital for patients. And there's going to be complex patient care needs. And there's no doubt these can be critically ill patients that are needing ECMO. And that requires, like I said before, a unique skill set. I will tell you, though, that many times I do see patients that are on ECMO who are walking around. They are on their iPhones. They are on their iPads. They're walking outside to the atrium, outside atrium of the hospital. It's quite amazing to see. So that said, right now there are over 400 ECMO programs across the entire United States, which is just amazing. And over the last 3 to 5 years, we've seen over 100 ECMO programs, get off the ground and get going very successfully. And if you look at, from a financial perspective, if you look at the market growth over the next, 5 years in that vicinity, it's anywhere between 4% and 6%. So ECMO is here. ECMO is here to stay, and that's why hospitals are becoming more interested in exploring starting up an ECMO program. I will tell you, for those who may not be familiar with this stat, ECMO is one of the top 5 highest paying DRG codes today, and we do not anticipate that changing anytime in the near term. So where hospitals are losing money in many different areas, and we all know that to be true, depending on your payer mix, typically On average, ECMO is not one of those areas. ECMO is actually a moneymaker for the hospital. And you can see, on average, it's around $100,000 per patient, reimbursed up to 23 days. After 23 days, then the reimbursement ends. So with that backdrop, what I'd now like to do is shift and talk clinically and turn the presentation over to Dr. Zanders.
So those of you on this webinar may wonder why a neurointensivist is so heavily involved in ECMO. And to just give you some background, when our critical care program really took off in 2021 at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center central campuses, we had a significant mortality because we were dealing with COVID, but our ECMO program needed some changes. So we put a moratorium on some of the things we were doing, invested in nursing education, and really developed a robust program to the point where we've doubled the amount of ECMO runs that we had previously, with a mortality that has significantly improved and is below the ELSO benchmarks. As Matt alluded to, there are a lot of reasons to use ECMO, and we have a slide moving forward that will address that. But it has been both beneficial in saving lives and also in changing the culture of nihilism with patients with advanced respiratory failure. With the advent of training our nurses who love technology, and a lot of our nurses are more pro-cardiac thinking, ECMO was yet another modality. And when they saw the outcomes and patients coming back to visit us and watching patients actually walk on a heart life-saving machine, it transformed us from what we were dealing with in the pandemic to a brighter future, and that has helped. By far, and this is not to advocate for any one perfusionist group, having a dedicated, specialized perfusionist for ECMO makes the biggest difference. You got to do it the right way for the management of these patients. The specialty programs have to be collaborative, and the ones that we work with were so collaborative. They educated our nurses. We had a room set up for education, for catheter placement, for training our nurses and our providers, and it became a family setting. That was transformative, and I'm convinced that our mortality was improved because of that collaboration. So many of you throughout the country are seeing an increase in respiratory illnesses, and interestingly enough, we've had less COVID and more flu-related respiratory illnesses. In the last month, I've treated two 40-year-old women who had influenza, who we placed on ECMO because of the advanced nature of the respiratory disease. So that is becoming an ongoing issue. And I can tell you that the mortality, had we not done that, would have been exponentially high, but we reversed the extent of the disease in these patients and had successful VV ECMO runs. So respiratory illnesses are increasing. The other thing that we're seeing is pulmonary issues related to the newer medications that are out there and reactions related to that. And ECMO has found a unique niche in those respiratory patients as well.
Dr. Zanders, for like myself, who is not clinical, could you just define what ARDS is? Because that's clearly an area for ECMO.
Yeah, so the respiratory distress syndrome, if many of you who are as old as I am can remember, really evolved in the pediatric era. And so we tapped on that diagnosis with adults as well. And you have to meet a subset criteria of how much oxygen you're getting compared to how much oxygen is showing up in your bloodstream. We call it a PF ratio. It's the amount of pressure of oxygen in your bloodstream. And you have to have X-ray diagnoses that fulfill that criteria and a reason. So that's what ARDS is.
So we're transitioning how ECMO can make a difference, and I will go ahead and read the question next. So the question is, are you transferring ECMO patients to other hospitals? And answers are as follows. Yes, because we are currently unable to serve patients who need ECMO. Answer number 2, yes, we cannulate and then transfer the patient to another local hospital. Answer 3, no, we have an in-house ECMO program. And answer number 4, I am not sure. So take a minute and lock in your answers. And while we're waiting for those, I will tell you that for just a point of interest, Specialty Care supports over 100 ECMO programs across the entire United States. And this year alone, we will help manage over 1,000 ECMO procedures. So we're a company with vast competency in the ECMO space, and we're really particularly proud of that as well. And there we are. All right, those are great. Thank you so much for those answers. So Steve, we're moving to ECMO in the history books.
Correct. So back in the early 50s, with the advent of pulmonary cardiac bypass machines, this is where kind of the step-off point for the evolution of ECMO began. And the machines, if you can imagine, were giant. They almost filled up a room like an IBM machine with all kinds of bells and whistles. And it would take me an hour to walk through the whole transformative process of that. But as more, we had difficulty with cannulas because they would often be too, quote, sticky. And then as we created different and better cannulas, we created different and better machines. The advent really took off in our pediatric population for advanced congenital disease, and that's where ECMO really found a significant platform. And then that is where our pediatric respiratory distress syndrome moniker took off. And then as we were treating more adults, as you can see through the slide, we've moved through the years with advanced cases. I can tell you that when I was in fellowship in the early 2000s, the machines that we used were basically a smaller looking cardiopulmonary bypass machine. Now our machines are a little bit bigger than a briefcase, which makes transport and movement and access so much better, especially in our small ICU rooms. And as you can see, I'll let you read the slides. The use of ECMO for more than just lung disease has taken off, and we're seeing that across internationally and across our campuses as well.
So, Steve, the next slide is ECMO has multiple hospital-wide use cases. When we talk about all the different potential applications that are so meaningful for these patients.
Yep. So, you know, the common platform is, you know, respiratory disease with adult respiratory distress syndrome. That is the most common. We also, whenever the lung or the heart is compromised from whatever disease, that's where ECMO can be very, very helpful. We often, to give you some degree of complexity, will start out by proning patients and putting them on their stomachs to help with oxygenation. And then if that is not effective and they do not meet, if they're not improving in that criteria, we then jump to ECMO. ECMO, we are now using, and I would need everybody to understand that ECMO is not just about the lung, but it also supports the heart. So there are two types of ECMO that we talk about. One is VV ECMO, which is venous ECMO, and one is VA ECMO. And what that means is on the venous side, we take blood away from the venous side and then deliver it to the right side of the heart, which is venous, because that blood has been oxygenated in a machine in the outside. VA ECMO was designed to support not only lung function, but cardiac function. And so that's often used in advanced cardiac cases such as cardiac arrest, where we can both oxygenate with the machine and also pump like an artificial heart. And our ECMO machines have that capability. So in light of that platform, anybody who has a diagnosis that one of those organ systems is down for can benefit. As many of you may know, you might have a PERT program, which is a pulmonary embolism response team within your system. Our VA ECMO program has transformed our PERT program because a lot of these patients become worse just prior to the procedure, or their respiratory status is so bad that intubation actually causes worsening issues. And we actually crash them to VA ECMO prior to doing anything. And that's been transformative in our program. You can see the list there of diagnoses that it's used for, but if I could step away a little bit, the other program that you need to consider for a perfusionist ECMO program, and this is happening across the country, and forgive me, Matt, for introducing this, but it's probably a good time, is our DCD programs, our donation after cardiac death. We are using perfusion now to oxygenate and keep organs alive that we couldn't before. And with that, the age of patients we are now able to accept has increased. And so we've compelled our specialty perfusionist programs to be involved with that. And that has also been a big benefit beyond what we're doing for ongoing patient care in our ICU. So we see more and more extensions in the use of ECMO. The last thing to be aware of, which may not be on the slide, is that there are ECMO quote programs that just simply remove carbon dioxide. And basically all of these things operate like a lung dialysis machine. And these ECMO specialty programs can provide for that as well.
Dr. Zanders, thank you so much for bringing up NRP. So that stands for normothermic regional perfusion for organ recovery, and it has exploded as of late, and it's phenomenal and incredible for patients who are desperately waiting for an organ transplant. And we're hopeful that this will help increase the number of organs that can be recovered and really help these patients out. So I'm really happy that you brought that up. Thank you so much. And we're moving to even transplant centers are increasing utilizing ECMO.
Yes. And as a step-off point to that, our hospital has now become a center for accepting patients from other hospitals who don't have a regional perfusion program. And you can do abdominal perfusion, thoracic abdominal perfusion, and that has just been an amazing process for us. In the transplant side, some patients who have had both cardiac lung transplants and even abdominal organ transplants sometimes get into some trouble. And we've been able to successfully help people with our ECMO programs with that capability.
And we're moving to the bottom line. ECMO can improve patient care.
Without a doubt. And I can't speak more highly of this. And I'm not a businessman, but I will tell you a story that my daughter studied at the Sorbonne in Paris and became very fluent in French. And when she came back to the States, her fluency was so good that she could almost think in French and speak in English and vice versa. As a clinician who's always at the bedside, who's never been trained in the business of medicine, my bottom line is, how do we save lives? And I've had to learn to speak the other language of the business side. And we have, at our hospital system, have been able to conjoin both having a business mindset, but at the same time, keeping the mission of patients alive. And our average, we average our ECMO runs by hours. But if you calculate that today, in our 2024 data, we had about 4 to 5 ECMO days and a significant improvement in mortality. And at the end of the day, that's really what this is all about. We can fix someone, we can send them home. And one of the biggest transformative cases was a gentleman who, during the pandemic, a father of 2 or 3 kids, he was actually the neighbor of one of our doctors. He was our first ECMO case when our program took over. And to see him come back to the hospital fully functional when he was near death was the most amazing thing. And we have so many stories like that. And one additional story was a woman who had pulmonary embolism. We had to put her both on an Impella to decompress the left ventricle and on VA ECMO. Within 3 or 4 days, she improved. We decannulated her, and she successfully survived in a case that would never have survived. And we're quite proud of that. And the business model that we've developed and how we've trained our providers to document correctly, giving them the proper CPT codes so that they can speak fluent business and continue their acumen in clinical care and save lives.
So let's move on to question number 3. The question is, what are your primary concerns about starting or expanding an ECMO program at your hospital? Several answers here, folks. Answer number 1, high startup cost. Answer number 2, staff readiness. Answer number 3, needed specialized skills. Answer number 4, potential for low patient volume. Number 5, ability to manage complex patient care needs. And finally, answer number 6, there are no concerns. Dr. Zanders, why, real quickly, while folks are locking in their answers, do you have any one of those that rose to the top for you when you started to explore, formalizing an ECMO program at the hospital?
In that we had an ECMO program, what we had to do was, instead of the startup cost had been there, but we needed a more specialized group. And so that startup cost to bring a group in up front was, obviously a cost, but at the end, dramatically saved ECMO run times and saved lives. So the cost on the back end was remunerated well. Our biggest thing was training staff and to try to train them to be collaborative with our ECMO team. And then, as it always happens, it's what I call the Kevin Costner Field of Dreams effect. If you build it, they will come. And we have doubled, if not almost tripled, the amount of patients we've had. One, because people know we're a successful ECMO program, but 2, the diagnoses have exceeded more than just lung reasons. So we've seen, since we've built it, we've seen it increased.
Thank you, Dr. Zanders. Very thoughtful commentary. So moving ahead, we're going to transition now. We've been talking clinically. We're going to now look through the lens of business and, really assessing starting up an ECMO program. Again, because I cover the entire United States, what I find and hear the most is we're really interested in starting this, Matt, because A, patient care, first and foremost. And number 2, shortly there, right behind that is we want to be seen as a luminary hospital in our geographic area. That's what I typically hear the most of. So what do we have to consider when starting up an ECMO program? There's a lot to consider, but if we boil it all down and we look at really the specific pillars of what we need to focus on and what we need to commit to, they are as follows. Typically you have to have some competency in terms of what does the infrastructure look like to build and scale up an ECMO program. If you don't know that, then that's going to be an Achilles heel to a certain extent. And sometimes that's why people look and lean to specialty care. You have to make sure that you've got competent people right out of the gate, competent clinicians out of the gate to take care of these patients. And if the goal of the hospital is to eventually train up their internal staff over time to be standalone and take care of those patients, there has to be a training plan mapped out. We have to set appropriate ROI targets. And that's really typically where we start first is what is this going to look like if we go ahead and put the money down and pay it forward? What is it going to look like on the back end? And we as an organization have a very thoughtful pro forma that we have developed and we work through collaboratively with clients that shows what a 3-year horizon would look like in terms of ROI, year 1, year 2, year 3. You have to be competent in terms of knowing what equipment we should be looking at, what disposables are important. And then what Eric's going to talk about is on the back end, which is critically important, is what does that data analysis look like? Capturing the data to help build key performance indicators, quality metrics, so that we can measure what's working really well. And there's always room for improvement. Where do we need to improve, and what are we going to do to implement that and make that improvement happen? So one thing that I explained earlier, the model that we find to be most efficient all the way around and fiscally responsible for clients, hospitals, is using the nurse-led, respiratory therapist-led model, taking care of these patients. The one thing that we, in my experience, and we as an organization take very seriously is the existing cardiac program that's in place at the hospital. That is the bread and butter of the hospital. And under no circumstance do we want to hurt the integrity of the cardiac program. If you think about it, perfusionists who can do ECMO and can sit ECMO are primarily in the operating room. If you start to pull that perfusionist now out of the operating room to sit bedside and take care of patients, that can be challenging because that perfusionist cannot be in two places at one time. It's impossible, and something's going to potentially become compromised. And that could be the cardiac program, which we do not want to have happen. So at the very get-go, we're working very closely with the cardiac surgeons, physicians like Dr. Zanders, in terms of guiding us with counsel, with direction, because they are really, like Dr. Zanders, are the pilot of that ECMO program. It is multidisciplinary for sure, don't get me wrong, but it needs strong physician support. So that is sort of the lens that we always are looking through when we're thinking about exploring starting up an ECMO program. So when we talk about what the ROI will look like, what could it look like? There's a lot of puts and takes to that, but what we're first looking at is what do we believe is the number of ECMO procedures that we may be able to do at our hospital. This is not, it's not ambitious. It's a realistic number of what we think we might be able to do year 1, year 2, and year 3. Then we look at the payer mix of the hospital. What is the differential between private pay, Medicare, and Medicaid? Because their reimbursement is dramatically different. And then we start to project sort of a picture of what the hospital may enjoy from a financial standpoint. There's a lot here on this slide, and just I'll hopefully navigate this so that you can follow me. So this is an example of a hospital that is looking to start up an ECMO program. As you can see here, in year 1, the hospital anticipates that they will do 10 ECMOs. In year 2, they're going to do 11 ECMOs. And in year 3, they're going to do 12 ECMOs. Now, some of you who may not know as much about ECMO may say, wow, that's a really low number. It is actually not a low number. On average, a ECMO program that's doing 10 or more ECMOs on an annual basis is a solid program. And I see that across the entire United States. So you can see of those 10 patients year 1, those 8 patients are going to generate about 1.2 million in revenue because of their payer mix. And as you can see, Medicaid is dramatically lower, and we would all know and expect that. And those 2 patients are going to generate some financial gain, but it's going to be much less than the private or Medicare. So in this example here, it's pretty significant cumulative potential revenue year over year. First year, we'll just round up 1.3 million. Now, having said that, if you look down in the notes section there in the box, there are program expenses that have to be layered into that. And that is a part of that pro forma exercise that I was talking about, that we as an organization at least believe it's very important and thoughtful to do with any hospital wanting to explore an ECMO program. But we have to look at staffing. We have to look at the bedside monitoring, purchasing or leasing the capital equipment and disposables, blood products, number of ICU days. So all of that has a cost associated with it, or a price tag. And so that does erode, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but it takes away from some of that cumulative potential revenue, as you can imagine. But I will tell you, if with a relatively decent payer mix, on average, what I see is most hospitals operating in the black year one. And I have done many of these exercises for many potential clients who are exploring this ECMO initiative. So with that said, we're going to move and transition now to the more on the reimbursement side of things with Eric's expertise. So the question is as follows. Are you confident your hospital can accurately align ECMO documentation, coding, and billing for the strongest possible reimbursement levels? This one's super easy because there's only two answers. Answer one is yes, and answer number two is no. So, Dr. Zanders and Eric, any fun anecdote you want to throw out there while folks are locking in their answers? Anything that you want to share? Not to put you on the spot, but I am.
Well, I can just add that along with the reimbursement for ECMO, in the 40-some patients we did last year, about half had VA ECMO, which required the use of other supplementary devices like Impella. And an Impella insertion on average is about a $50,000 remuneration back. So the ripple effects for the use of an ECMO program are sometimes unseen in some of this pro forma data. Also, the appropriate CPT coding by the physicians that are involved and providers. So there's always that additive remuneration that we don't often think of. And then the decreased length of stay for advanced respiratory illnesses is another uncalculated one that we often see.
That is excellent feedback. Thank you very much for that. So, Eric, with that, I will turn this to you, and I'm going to presume, Eric, you can see the slides?
I can see them, so thank you for confirming that. So yeah, this is some work that we put together last year with one of the sites that we provide service at. They came to us with a question kind of relating to, the efficiency and sort of the work process around, making the clinical notes and doing the billing. And so if we go to the next slide, we'll see some basic statistics of what we were doing. So we reviewed a total of 70 cases that were across 4 calendar years. And the question was really, how often are we seeing things that sort of fit our expectation for that hospital's billing strategy? What we found was actually really surprising. A lot of folks maybe would suppose that there's some maybe codes that are missed because you have a long duration of care, you have a lot of different folks providing that care in the hospital, trying to communicate with each other. We found that none of the 70 cases were found to have completely accurate billing from first to last. If you thank you. As you advance, you'll see that in total, that was about $74,000 in charges that this hospital would have intended to apply that were just missing, coming out to about $1,000 per patient. So the wonderful thing about having some data behind a question is you can, first put some, basic directional information to it. So we found, of course, none of those patients were completely accurate, but we're also able to say, like, what exactly was the magnitude of the problem. So it wasn't exactly that the sky was falling, but this was certainly representing a lost opportunity to kind of optimize things for this particular site. So at the bottom, you can see, if you would just go back really quickly, at the bottom, you can see a small table that we made that just kind of summarizes the kinds of things that are overlooked, that were overlooked in this example. And most of them had to do with these daily management codes. I think this is kind of a symptom of how this site had formerly done its clinical note entry. We had different folks entering it in different ways, and it creates a little bit of ambiguity for those coders about exactly what they're seeing and how to interpret it. On the next slide, we have some graphs that kind of summarize how these errors and omissions sort of broke down by the first by the cannulation type. So Dr. Zanders was describing that those VA patients are mostly cardiac focused, and there were about 6 missing codes per case in those. The VV, the more traditional respiratory type of case, you had about 9 missing codes per case. And those have associated dollar figures with them there on the right-hand side. So maybe a little bit more impact for the VV type of case, which happens to have, on average, a longer duration. in the next slide, we'll take a look across the different types of indications for ECMO. So in the cardiac example, a pure cardiac indication, something like 6-missed, COVID being very different, right? So COVID-19 patients, again, a very long duration of ECMO run until a lot of those folks are weaned, and there were about 10 errors in each of those cases. And we can see a sort of a similar breakdown with the financial impact per indication there. And it's kind of interesting. You can always spend a lot of time looking at a graph like this and start to ask other interesting questions. And one that this gives to me is just to notice that not every tall bar on the left is equated with a tall bar on the right. So some of this can be described with the simple logic of longer cases have a greater chance of making an error or missing something, but not in every case, right? So if you look at the other category, which includes, Dr. Zanders can probably help us a lot with what would fit into such a category that's not already described. But some of these are a little non-intuitive. So in the final slide, I think I just want to reinforce this idea that the longer the ECMO run, the greater the chance of an omission. You see a pretty clear pattern there as time goes on. Not to say that it's a certainty, right? We can see so many cases where things did go well. A case that goes nearly 10 days and has a very small number of errors. So it really, I think it has to do with the particular backgrounds of the people who are, coming in and making that note and their habits of documentation. And that's where I think a lot of this variability has come in after kind of diving into this case study. So I think we have one more slide, is it? Or is that, yeah. So to conclude, we found about $1,000 of underbilling per patient, which, summed over years can really, add up to something significant. And most of the breakdown that we found was in the charting itself. So coders know what they know. They're not clinicians. And it's really incumbent on the folks who are kind of organizing the whole ECMO program and coordinating it, doing the education to get all of these teams speaking the same language, right? So when someone in the care team does something, they can just reflect that very transparently, and it's just very easy for the coder to do the right thing. And so there are different methods for taking care of that, but that's the extent of our case study.
Eric, thank you very much. Appreciate that. So with that concludes our educational presentation. And as we started at the beginning, on behalf of Specialty Care, we want to thank you for your thoughtful time and giving up a part of your day to spend with us. And Ashley, I will turn it to you and team to go ahead and perhaps open it up for any Q&A that we may have from our audience members.
Thank you, all of you, for your engaging presentation. I really enjoyed it. It was informative. I would like to invite those listening to enter your questions into the Q&A box located on your computer screens. And they came in. Let's see. The first one was, I think this is for you, Dr. Zanders. It says, I know that the average reimbursement period for ECMO is 23 days, but how long should a patient be on ECMO? And why does reimbursement end after 23 days?
So I can speak to the how long. It's really based on their condition. If they're a typical case of COVID with ARDS, they may average anywhere from 3 to up to 14 days, depending on the overall situation. So it's always diagnostically based. And you can't say, the average post-cardiotomy patient is going to have 3 days. It's all very dependent on that. As far as the 23 days, my understanding, and I'm going to let Matt or Eric speak to this, has something to do with CMS regulation and reimbursements and time periods. Maybe they could speak to that as the answer.
Yeah, Dr. Zanders, I think you answered that perfectly. And I probably don't have much to add to that other than, everything has a finite period of time, right, for reimbursement. Doesn't matter if it's ECMO or think of anything else there in the hospital setting. I think the important thing for us to be good stewards of, and Dr. Zanders, that's really you and physicians and clinicians, is ensuring that we really have good patient selection criteria established up front. And that criteria will dictate what patient we should put on ECMO and what patient we should not put on ECMO, so that it hopefully falls within that window of time from a reimbursement perspective. That said, we do ECMO for patient care first and foremost. And I can tell you, at least in my experience, there are times when a patient is on ECMO longer than 23 days. I will say, though, in my experience, though, that number it's not that it's an anomaly, but it's less than those patients that are in that window of about 10 to potential 14 days on ECMO, where we get the patient on ECMO, we stabilize, we give the organs a rest, and then we can wean the patient off of ECMO. But that's an excellent question.
Well, it kind of leads right into our next question of, is there an ideal ECMO patient candidate? How do you know if ECMO therapy is the right treatment option for ECMO?
So I guess that should be pointed towards me. It's based on, first of all, the condition of the two organs that we address. And I will add a third sibling to that. The first is lung, based on PF ratio and the advanced nature of their breathing issues. So I'll give you an example. I had a woman who had subarachnoid hemorrhage with an aneurysm that we had to do decompressive craniotomy on. She had ARDS from aspiration and pulmonary issues related to that. And we proned her and she improved on her oxygenation status. But she would not have been a candidate because of the requirements for heparin, anticoagulation, and all the other various factors. So you have to, every patient has unique characteristics. It's not a one, come all type of situation. In the other category of heart, it's those patients who are failing conventional medicinal therapy, who maybe fail mechanical circulatory support, such as an Impella or a pump machine. And so those patients would be candidates as well. The other time is just to give the heart a rest in post-cardiac arrest or after a very significant MI. The last category, which we spoke to briefly, is our normothermic regional perfusion program. And those patients are self-selected because they are what they call a donation after cardiac death. And we bring them to the OR. We allow them to pass within a certain time frame. And then once that has happened, we perfuse their organs. And that's a select criteria based on the organ procurement organization guidelines.
Thank you, Dr. Zanders. Let's see, there was a question that I saw related to that about how often is the technology for ECMO care updated or upgraded?
Matt may be able to speak to that.
Maybe and then please, Dr. Zanders, add your thoughts as well. So from my experience, and for those who may not be familiar, it's an excellent question, by the way. There is a body, what I refer to it as a governing body over ECMO, and it's called ELSO, and it stands for Extracorporeal Life-Saving Organization. They set the standard, if you will, for all things ECMO, and we as an organization follow ELSO and the ELSO guidelines explicitly. And as a matter of fact, Dr. Zanders and their hospital just had recently received one of the Centers of Excellence Award through ELSO, which is a significant feat, and that compliments to Dr. Zanders and team. That said, that is the body that guides us and makes recommendations, makes recommended changes, and that's who is the one that's really kind of leading that charge. Dr. Zanders, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, as I alluded to before, when I was in fellowship, our machines were giant and the room capacity was always limited. We've now honed that down to very, very small machines. And as our artificial intelligence technology has taken off, so has our machines. The other big category is cannulas, which can sometimes be problematic as far as clotting. And so on average, every 2 to 3 years, we see a change in maybe chemical structure, maybe some intelligence built into the HeartMate or the ECMO pump platform. And as we've increased the cases, there are more companies that are looking into advanced development.
Thank you, Dr. Zanders. I think this one might be for Eric. How might a hospital go about optimizing or strengthening their documentation of ECMO care to avoid underbilling?
Yeah, that's a great question. In our experience, it was first a human technology, making sure that you have everybody trained and interpreting the same things in the same way, especially from the clinical side and how they make their notes. But there are, technological helpers that do exist. So most of the EHR systems have dot phrases in place, right? So you can program certain types of notes to have a certain character that everyone agrees is to be interpreted a certain way. And being a data person myself, having had to sift through a lot of handwritten clinical notes, that's a very inefficient, maybe 20th century way to do it. And so moving forward, having some of these automated systems to supplement the clinical note taking and make it easy for the coders is really a great way forward.
Thank you. And this one says, if my hospital were to commit to an ECMO program startup, how long should we expect the process to take? If we are working with an external partner during the startup, how long will it take to gain self-sufficiency? Matt, can you take this one for me, I think?
Yeah, that is a great question as well. So in my experience, if a hospital does decide to partner with an outsourced provider to scale up and begin to get a program off the ground, the timing can vary depending on how focused the multidisciplinary team is at the hospital, which we participate with. But we see it at anywhere between 4 to 6 months. This is involving, building out policies and procedures, again, inclusion, exclusion criteria, order sets, the list goes on. And that takes us someone with a competency to be able to build that out. And then, of course, you start putting patients on ECMO, and you're identifying, who within the hospital would like to be an ECMO specialist. And then we work to train those people up so that in this example that I'm giving, then we are eventually no longer needed. And that timing can depend, but, we like to push for, sooner rather than later, but there's so many different variables. If I threw a time frame out there, then you may hold that against me at a later time. But, it's at least to get the program up and going, where you can put a patient on ECMO anywhere between 4 to 6 months. Dr. Sanders, am I hopefully in the right ballpark?
Yeah, absolutely. And that 4 to 6 months is also predicated on finding the physician or provider champion that will help to guide the program, because the specialist, notwithstanding, make a profound impact. You need to have people that are dedicated so that they understand CPT coding and understand the billing, so that and cost containment at the same time, life-saving measures are made available. And once you have a physician or provider champion coupled to a good specialized perfusionist program, the time frame is lessened. It also incorporates getting nursing culture involved and letting them know the transformative nature of that type of life-saving procedure and process.
Thank you, Dr. Zanders. You mentioned something about, let me pull this question up, getting people on staff with billing. This question says, I was told by our compliance department that we cannot bill the daily management CPT code since these patients are inpatients. I hope I represented that question properly. Maybe Matt or Eric can give that one a shot.
Sure, I can say that from our position as an ECMO service provider, collaborating with our hospital partners, we don't advise people on their strategies. That's, I think, something more appropriately taken care of by your hospital administration. But I do know that whatever your strategy is, some of the things I was bringing up, I think are key points to remember. So, so yeah, and it sounds, I think, from the question like that is a maybe an indication that that first step, how important it is that everyone's on the same page and you're communicating as an entire unit between the administration, the clinicians, and such, how you're approaching each of those questions.
Can you tell us really, really quickly how might a hospital go about optimizing or strengthening their documentation of ECMO care to avoid underbilling?
I think Dr. Zanders might be able to give us the best advice. Dr. Zanders?
Yeah. So we currently use Epic as our EHR system. The best way is constant communication, but we built into our ECMO program dedicated smart phrases, and we have a specific note for ECMO care every day. And to answer the question previous, it is a billable daily issue. You can bill daily for taking care of these patients. They're the sickest of the sick, and the CPT codes and our documentation helps to support that.
Thank you, Dr. Zanders. Do any of you have any closing remarks?
Well, I will. Maybe I'll speak on behalf of our team here. We really greatly appreciate the partnership with HFMA, and our goal is to be as objective as we can be to impart education and knowledge in the clinical space that we all work in. And ECMO, as you can tell, is something that the three of us are incredibly passionate about. And it's all because even though we are different, with Dr. Zanders being a physician and me being a business person, Eric being brilliant at everything that he does, we focus on the patient first, and that's why we believe ECMO is just so vitally important and should really thoughtfully be considered for hospitals across the country. So we hope that this will be inspiring, to think about as we conclude the presentation. But thank you very much for everyone's time.
Absolutely. Thank you, Matthew. And with that, we have reached the conclusion of today's webinar. I would like to thank our speakers and Specialty Care for sponsoring. We hope that you found the presentation informative. Thank you for your participation. Have a great day.